Good Thursday afternoon, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandajis here with your special edition of your tropical update on September 10th, the peak of the hurricane season, and right on schedule. We have two named storms, Paulette and Rene, now both expected to become hurricanes in the next couple days, and four separate tropical waves that are each candidates for the next named storms. So why is today, September 10th, the peak of the hurricane season? Well, conditions out there in the Atlantic basin are the most optimal. It's also the most likely day of the year that you're going to find an active tropical system out there in the Atlantic. There are two main contributors to this. Wind shear, it's the lowest all year at this time in mid-September, and the water temperatures in the Atlantic. That's the fuel for tropical systems. The warmest they'll be all year is right around now. Let's look back at the last 6 seasons on the peak of the season. 9-10, September 10th. Last year, we had Gabrielle out in the Atlantic basin. 2018, Florence, Isaac, and Helene all coexisting in the basin at that time. 2017, Irma and Jose. And 2016, 15, and 14 on September 10th had no active systems out there in the entire Atlantic basin. This year, of course, we have Paulette and Rene. Now, actually, the peak of the hurricane season isn't just one day. It's more like 8 weeks. We see an increase in activity beginning around late August, around August 20th, and it stretches all the way, say, through the middle of October, give or take a few days. That's when we find over 75% of all tropical storms developing within that time, over 85% of all Cat 1 and 2 hurricanes, and over 95% of all major hurricanes. That's a Category 3, 4, or 5. When we look at the Atlantic hurricane season overall, from June 1st through November 30th, you can really pinpoint where the peak of the season is, September 10th, right here on this graph. That's when you find the most activity in terms of hurricanes and tropical storms. And right around August 20th or so, you see the increase right there. And all the way, say, through around mid-October, even late October, there's a secondary peak right there before the activity really starts to drop on off as we round out the season at the end of November. So climatological peak is today, and look what's going on out there. Two named systems, Paulette and Rene, and four separate tropical waves, one of which has a 90% chance of becoming a named storm, which would be Sally, within the next 48 hours to 5 days. Here's how it looks on satellite imagery. We're looking at the infrared, tells us the temperature of the cloud tops. We look at that to see the intensity of the thunderstorm activity. And with the associated tropical systems right now, that's some pretty intense activity. You can see the shades of white on there. This is associated with Paulette, especially in the last couple of frames, a blow-up of convection or thunderstorm activity there, giving us an indication that this could be starting to strengthen. It has weakened over the past couple of days. It peaked out, maxed out, I should say, at 65-mile-an-hour winds 2 days ago. Now it's down to sustained at 50 miles an hour. We'll see at the next update at 5 o'clock this evening if, in fact, it has strengthened. It is, though, still battling some wind shear. That as we switch it up on visible satellite, you can see the evidence of that, exposing the low-level circulation and even close to the low-level center here. A southwesterly shear blowing and dislocating the convection or thunderstorm activity and pushing it off to the northeast of that storm center. We call this a tilted system there, and as it moves off to the north and west, that wind shear is expected to weaken, meaning strengthening will likely be occurring as this heads close to Bermuda and possibly impacts Bermuda by early next week. Here's the forecast track through the upcoming weekend. We're strengthening up to a 70-mile-per-hour strong tropical storm at this point as we get to Sunday morning at around 8 o'clock. And then it takes a hard turn off to the north, strengthening up to a Category 1 hurricane with potentially sustained winds of 85 miles per hour. And right in the center of this cone is Bermuda. So we're going to have to watch that very, very closely. Not a weak system here by any means. 85-mile-an-hour winds is 85-mile-an-hour winds, especially if the center passes very close to Bermuda. You'd see some of those very strong winds. How does it look on the computer models? Well, this is the GFS ensemble, run 21 times. There's 21 members here. We tweak the initialization on it ever so slightly to get a different outcome. And so far, in the next 3-4 days, pretty good consensus. Certainly there's a little bit of divergence the farther out you go, and way out you go, there's a large spread, but they are all kind of hinting at that hard right turn as the storm kind of picks out and takes advantage of a weakness in a developing ridge there that should take it off to the north. Notice there are two members that say, I don't know about that. We may take it a little bit farther west here. I will say the trend has been to edge this farther and farther to the west. A couple days ago when we were talking about this was looking to pass well east of Bermuda. Now it could be hitting Bermuda directly. Here's a look at the shift in those trends. This is yesterday morning's GFS Ensemble runs here. Notice the big confusion with those members kind of all over the place. And when we go back and look at right now, or this morning's run, much more consistency there as we go forward in time. So we'll see if that's a trend that continues to play on out. Again, there's yesterday's. How about all the other tropical models? Well, pretty good consistency here, heading off to the west-northwest and then taking that turn to the north. Again, most likely bring some sort of impacts to Bermuda by early next week. So what's driving the kind of weird path with Paulette here? Well, right now it's sitting and being driven to the west with a big ridge of high pressure to the northeast of the system there. As it moves farther to the west and starts to strengthen, as the wind shear starts to drop on off and the dry air is no longer an issue, it'll start to get pulled north with a weakness in the ridge developing as it begins to sense, as it's a stronger storm, more upper level steering features there. So that'll drive it to the north as a stronger storm, pushing it somewhere near Bermuda by early next week. Even though it looks to be a miss right now for the eastern seaboard, still impacts will likely be felt in the way of wave heights and ocean impacts and coastal impacts here. We could see offshore winds, or waves, I should say, up and over 15 to 20 feet. And you see some waves here, 30, 35 feet out in the middle of the Atlantic, possibly coming close to Bermuda there. All right, our secondary name system, that's Rene, and you see it here on satellite imagery. It doesn't look all that good right now. It's kind of a little bit disheveled there with the convection activity, not all that robust there, kind of dying out in the last couple of frames. And this system is actually not all that far away from Paulette. It's actually closing the gap a little bit. Yesterday it was around 900 miles away from it. Now it's under 800. So they could start to influence each other in terms of their track because they're similar strength. 50-mile-an-hour wind sustained gusts up to around 65. Now, Rene itself, too, is battling a little bit of some wind shear, but this time it's coming in from the east. So you can see it kind of offsetting some of its convection activity off to the western side of the storm there. It's expected to overcome that and also strengthen to a Category 1 hurricane as we head into the next couple of days, peaking at around 75-mile-per-hour winds, low-level Category 1. But thankfully, this storm track, west-northwest, staying out in the middle of the open Atlantic, not affecting anybody. So Rene, most likely a storm we can write off any direct threats to any land masses. However, there are several other tropical waves to talk about, and a few very close to the United States. We had one that we were watching off the eastern seaboard that has been dismissed, 0% chance of that developing. Good news. But there is also now a wave developing through the Bahamas in the next 5 days that has about a 40% chance of developing as it pushes west and enters the Gulf of Mexico, where the water temperatures have significantly come back or warmed back up after Laura and Marco moved through there a couple of weeks ago. So there's plenty of fuel available. And there's another wave here. You see that one, 10-20% chance over the next 5 days as that drifts to the west and then eventually southwest. So anytime that you have waves out in the Atlantic Ocean right around the peak of the hurricane season, you really need to watch it because significant changes in its forecast and intensity trends can be quite surprising sometimes around. So we have to watch that closely. Think of it as putting a seed in a very well-fertilized field. I mean, the chances of it developing or growing are pretty great with the overall environmental conditions very conducive for it to do so. Then two waves, or one wave really right now that's coming off the coast of Africa that has the potential into splitting into two separate entities. One of which, the southernmost tier one, the low latitude traveler here, looks to be a 90% chance within 5 days of developing. The next name is Sally. And then if it does indeed split into two entities, the northern one would likely become Teddy and possibly take another track similar to what Rene and Paulette did. Again, not set in stone. Things can certainly change here, but about a 40% chance of that developing. Now let's look at the long-range computer models. We'll start off with the European model and pretty much take it out the next 10 days to show you the evolution of that wave coming off the coast of Africa, okay? So we're starting off this afternoon, September 10th at around 3 p.m. Let's go farther out in time. We'll sail through the day on Friday and into Saturday and Sunday. By that point in time, we have two evident waves, one here off towards the east, and then another one here. This will likely potentially be Sally cruising across the main development region in the Atlantic. Going farther out in time, early next week, here we are Monday afternoon, or Monday night, I should say, at 9:30, as the wave itself is getting a little bit more organized, pushing closer to the Leeward Islands and closer to the Caribbean. By Tuesday and into Wednesday, it enters the Caribbean here as a stronger system, plenty of tropical moisture, and as it moves through the extremely warm sea surface temperatures in this part of the eastern Caribbean and moves close to Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, we could potentially be having ourselves a hurricane in the Caribbean here with an intensifying storm as it drifts off towards the northwest, and potentially by the time we get to not this coming weekend but next weekend, Sunday, September 20th, this could be something potentially threatening Florida, or even could be farther off to the west, headed into the Gulf of Mexico. How does the American model, the GFS, see things? Well, similar scenario here as we go out in the shorter term up through this weekend. We'll stop it at Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Here we have our two separate systems, likely Teddy and then likely Sally right here. Rather weak at this point in time, but as they travel westwards, they start to strengthen. You see here by Tuesday at 4 in the morning, a stronger storm heading into the Leeward Islands and then entering the Caribbean by the time we get to Wednesday at 7 p.m. as a stronger system, potentially even at that point a hurricane, similar track to what we just saw the European playing out. So there is agreement in both of the global scale models here in the long term, because this is already out to Friday, September 18th, 8 days out from now, a potentially intensifying tropical storm or hurricane heading towards Dominican Republic or Haiti, a very similar track playing out from here on out from what we saw Laura do just a couple weeks ago, kind of straddling the southern coast of Cuba and maybe even ejecting out into the Gulf of Mexico. Again, 10 days out, a lot can change and will change, but these are two areas that we need to really watch. Teddy and Sally coming off the coast of Africa, because look at the overall setup in the ocean. Very warm sea surface temperatures. That's just the skin of the ocean, the first like 10, 20 meters, right? But this part of the ocean as well has a significant amount of heat energy that's been stored in the ocean throughout weeks and months of intense daytime heating from the sun being at a higher angle in the sky. So there's plenty of energy here, and in some cases that ocean heat content, the warm ocean waters, extends down to 100, 200 meters. Why that's significant is because when storms move over the ocean, they churn it up, something called upwelling. And typically what happens if the ocean heat content doesn't extend down in depth, it replaces the warm ocean waters at the surface with cooler waters from below. And in this scenario, if we have a storm anywhere within where you're seeing some of the brighter shades of blue, turquoise, orange, and yellow, it's just upwelling warm water. So there's unlimited amount of heat energy here for these storms to take advantage of. So certainly a time of year we need to watch everything that develops off the coast of Africa. All right, well, that's it for today. If you have a question, don't be afraid to ask. You can find me on social media. You can put it right in the feed here on YouTube or on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter. We'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.